I want to talk to you about color, marker rendering color, and using the marker for flat color. Now first, before I even get started, I've got a page where I've set up some swatches and a sense of some just tank tops so I can do it as a flat or imagine it on the figure. And here's a figure from a previous demo, and I know this is a page that I just want underneath this so it doesn't bleed into other colors or under other papers. So again, going back to this flat color. Flat solid color means all I'm going to do is use marker as one tone. It's not getting shadow, it's not getting light source, it's not getting any reflections. It's just a flat, solid color. Okay, so we understand that term. Now, if I want to make it something more, like for instance, I'm surrounded by fabrics that I might be using in my collection. And here's this little blue knit. It's not quite solid, and I know that it's a little bit different than this flat color. So I'm going to start, though, with flat color. That's my base. That's my first layer. And to get this kind of heathered look, there's a little bit of gray tonality to this. I'm going to actually take my gray marker and darken this up, darken this color up a little bit. Move that figure. She's shining through too much. Can you see I'm modulating the color a little bit with that gray, getting it a little bit deeper? Markers can't always get as close as you want, but they get pretty close to the right color. I think that paint, watercolors, gouache does better, but at this point, markers are faster. So what I need now for this to be a knit and not just a solid flat color is I'm going to go back in there and add my knit rows. And now I've got some kind of surface going on. So flat color, I've got stripes. Here I've got surface interest. This is modulating color. This is like a crushed velvet. And here I have a knit. So everybody's got to have their own kind of surface. So flat color, I'm getting into a knit. How about a modulated color? And I've got my markers set up here. I know what colors I'm going to use. And I want to use about 3 layers. I'm going to use a light color, a middle value, and a darker value to get my sense of this velvet. So I start again with my first. This was 2 or 3 layers. Remember, I used 1, then I used 1 layer with gray and then pencil. Here I'm going to use my base layer again. I'm going to get a little bit of color coming in to make that modulation. That's my second layer. So that's middle value. Wait a few minutes, and then I'm going to put on my darker value. Now notice I'm actually changing marker companies. Sometimes there's a different chemical reaction and it makes it bleed a little bit. Other times there's no problem whatsoever. So at this point, I now have that kind of background fluctuation of the colors that I was talking to you about. What I need to do is get a real velvety surface. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to use my pad, has a little bit of its own texture. Use the side of my pencil here. On the knit, I use the point. Now I'm going to use the side of my pencil. So it's going to pick up a little bit of the paper surface. It's going to come through. And I'll get the color modulation here and get a sense of, okay, now I know that I've got 3 different fabrics in my collection. I have a solid, I have the knit because I've got the knit rows that are given the suggestion of knit rows in my rendering, and now I'm giving you a surface interest, so I've given you 3 different types of fabric. Well, I've previously colored these flats and these kind of action figure, the posed tank top, and I'm going to take a color and now do add shadow. So this I could just add a little bit of movement to the fabric on this flat, but on the figure one, I'm going to build in a little bit of the drape, build in some of the bust line, and maybe a little pull of the fabric in the pose. I can do that here as well, but I'm going to go back. I have to work these colors a little bit more before I can add the shadow and get into the knit. That was our flat with a little bit of shadow. Just to go, I maybe to pull this out a little bit. I think it dried too light. Can you see where I did the bust line? Okay. On this one, I get it a little bit darker. I'm going to put a little bit of shadow, bust line, contour. That's just for the drape, a little bit of the drape. Now when I go for the knit with my colored pencil, I'm going to start in center front and work my way left and right of center front to get that straight ribbing for the knit. Again, on the figure that's posed, the tank top that's posed, I want to get to center front, but now I'm going to work with the contours of the body. Imagine that they're there and suggest that the knit has a little bit more cling in the posed figure. And the figures here, when I get into my velvet, now I need to get into my 3 layers plus a shadow, so it gets a little bit more complex. And my second value, going for my second value on this, and going for the second value on this, the second value. Now I'm going to work what I think what the pose might change and work with the fabric as opposed to just being flat. Getting underneath the bust line again, working with the body, working with the pose, I should say. And now I take my colored pencil, go back to that side that I was doing, and put that in. Trying to get that crushed velvet look, and trying to get the crushed velvet look on the figure, the posed figure. Maybe even leaving a little bit of a highlight. What do you think? Because that way we can get some contour. Do you see that? Right on Princess seam, kind of on the side of the body. This gives me, again, I think much more of a dialogue about my fabric choices. You can see differences between the flat, the rib, and the surface interest fabrics. That's what you want in your sketch. And these are easy starting points where you can practice. You just get yourself a little template and work them out. And sometimes you want a little test sheet also. This is my test sheet. And you know what? I take all my colors out and I start labeling them so I know exactly what I want. And then I put them down in front of me and I put them in order. I would do lightest first and get to my darkest color if I need a gray or if I need a little hint of some other colors. If I need to use a pen, if I were going to do some construction, if I wanted top stitching or something like that, maybe I want to pull that out in color so I can get that extra pen line to do that for me. Materials make a big difference because if you've got it all set up and you know what you're using, you won't make mistakes. And I'll end this demo video with a review of some of the marker terms you may want to practice. The goal of this video was to help you with some basic rendering terms and some surface interest. Hope it worked.